As a king, Charles was a disaster, but as a man under sentence of death, he acted with courage and with dignity. Fractures and fallings out between the king and Parliament and Scottish Presbyterians and Irish Catholics and all the peoples of the British Isles led to a series of civil wars which lasted for more than a decade and cost the lives of thousands, perhaps 200 or 250,000, as much as a 20th of the population of England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and ultimately the life of the king. Charles was convicted of tyranny and treason in a trial at the High Court of Justice in London, a court created especially for that trial. A trial that lasted 7 days. His sentence read that the court, being satisfied that he, Charles Stuart, was guilty of the crimes of which he had been accused, did judge him tyrant, traitor, murderer and public enemy to the good people of the nation, to be put to death by the severing of his head from his body. The king was given 3 days to put his affairs in order, but he saw only his children and his chaplain. He spent the day after the sentence burning papers, praying and saying farewell to his 2 youngest children, Henry, Duke of Gloucester, aged just 9, and the Princess Elizabeth, 11. It said that the king told his 2 youngest not to grieve, that they should obey their elder brother, Charles, the lawful sovereign. Elizabeth cried hysterically when she realised she wouldn't see her father again, and he, it said, hid his own tears to calm her. The Queen and his other children he never got to say goodbye to. Some of the children had fought for his father, and besides they were all in exile on the continent. On the 30th of January, a cold Tuesday morning, the king dressed carefully. He wore either a thick shirt or 2 shirts, accounts do differ a little. But he wore them so that he wouldn't shiver and people wouldn't see him being cold as a sign of fear. He prayed until the summons arrived at 10 o'clock, when Charles, the bishop and his attendant, Thomas Herbert, walked across St James's Park, the king wrapped in a big black cloak, surrounded on all sides by guards. A huge crowd had gathered that morning. Despite the bitter weather, they gathered to see a momentous event. But they were held so far away that few could hear the king's last words, but they were recorded and I have them here for you. He said that I go from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown, where no disturbance can be, no disturbance in the world. The scaffold, a platform for the execution, was erected against the side of the Banqueting House in Whitehall. It was hung around with black cloth, and in the centre, the blackened and sanded floor, stood an axe and a lower block, a quartering block, upon which the king would lay his head and have his head removed. 2 men, heavily disguised with masks, and nobody knows who they are, even to your day, I suspect. They stood ready to perform the act. The king, his hair bound up in a white nightcap, took off his cloak and lay down. He told the executioner he would say a short prayer and then give a signal that he was ready. After a little pause, the king stretched out his hands and the axe fell. The executioner severed his head with one clean blow, and as opposed to normal executions, did not lift up the head and say, here is the head of a traitor, and it wasn't taken to a gate to be placed as a warning to those that committed crimes, but was instead reattached to the body and buried with honour. Many in that huge crowd were aghast. One witness commented, "There was such a groan by the thousands then present as I have never heard before, and I desire may never hear again." The king was executed on the 30th of January 1649 outside the Banqueting House in Whitehall. His trial and his execution were the first of their kind.